It's Tuesday live stream time. If you're joining for the first time, I do these regular Tuesday live streams. Generally, what I'm doing is preparing for my online workshop on a Thursday, and I generally try and use this as a planning session. And I just remembered I need to do something, so I'm going to be right back. Make sure the do not disturb sign is on. Okay, so today I'm going to be continuing to develop some blocks without React, so using plain vanilla JavaScript. Last week let me open up the block editor handbook. Last week I developed a block which doesn't do much really. Let's just see if I've got it installed. I don't think I do. Oh, I do. Okay, so let's activate it. And all it does is it adds some content in the back end, which is not editable, but it has an icon and I can move it around and I can remove it. It doesn't have any settings except for the default settings. And I can view it on the front end and it's got a different color scheme on the front end. So that's all I've done so far. I'm basically working through the blocks how-to guide on the block editor handbook. And we've done the first page and we've done the styling. So we're going to now jump onto introducing attributes and editable fields. And so today's goal is I want to, hopefully you can see the little sort of today topics window under the video chat. I'm going to implement block attributes. I'm going to implement the RichText component to make the content editable. And then I'm hoping to make the styles editable as well. So I plan on, if we have a look at the style sheets we had earlier, I want to actually turn these into attributes and make it possible to change the background color, the text color, and the padding. And to do that, we're going to need to use different controls in the toolbar. And so we're going to try and do that today. So that's the goal, at least. Don't know how long it's going to take me, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's get going. Okay, this is the wrong screen to begin with because I'm looking at the React version. I don't want the React version, I want the JavaScript version. There's our block. Okay. So the first step is to add some attributes. If you read through it, I'm going to make notes while I'm doing this to prepare for my workshop. So let me go into the issue where I'm keeping an idea of my notes. That one in there. Okay. Structure. The structure needs change. The state of block maintains your editing session as a plain JavaScript object. Okay, so to achieve this, the state of a block is maintained throughout the editing session as a JavaScript object. And when an update occurs, the edit function is invoked again. So that means every time a change happens, the edit function is invoked. And the attributes are updated, and the output of the block is a function of its attributes. One challenge of maintaining the representation of a block as a JavaScript object is that we must be able to extract this object again from the saved content of a post. This is achieved with the block type's attributes property. So that's the property. When registering a new block type, the attributes property describes the shape of the attributes object that you'd like to receive in the edit and save functions. each value is a source function to find the desired value from the markup of the block. In the code snippet above, when loading the editor, the content value will be extracted from the HTML of the paragraph to be saved in the post markup. Let's open up this. So here it talks about attributes, so we might as well put that in there. Provide information about the data stored by the block, for example, rich content, a list of image URLs, etc., etc. Attribute definition contains either a type or an enum. Okay, so it's the attribute, and then it has a type, and then it has various other options. So source, selector, attribute. Okay. Through the attributes prop. Extract value from the source, check value matches the type, or is one of the enum values. So here it's the edit function, passing you destructuring the attributes, which we'll dive into in a second. And then it can return the URL and the title, for example. And then things get updated in the save function. Attributes without a source will automatically be saved in the block comment delimiter. So this is basically a key value pair in the block markup. And to save, passes an attribute, and then you output the URL. The saved HTML will contain the title and size in the content delimiter, so title and size, and the URL in the image. Okay, so depending on how you specify it, so let's go back up here. So URL is a string, but it's an attribute on the image selector, and it gets it from the source. That is why it passes it into there. But because title is just a string, it gets stored there. And with size being an enum, it's one of a list of options, either small or large. So you use that for different selections and things. And I think how you set up the attributes specifies how they work in the settings area. Okay, and there's type validation, enum validation. Okay, so we're going to have to dive into attributes and understand them. Okay. So most of this is depending on different types of attributes that you set up. I'm not going to worry too much about that now because we're just going to be working with content and then possibly the CSS variables later, but we'll worry about that when we get there. Okay, so let's start with setting up the content because we're going to use that for the rich text. In fact, we can just take this whole block here. And then in the block.json file, anywhere in the top level, I usually like to do it just after the name, but it doesn't matter where I put it. It needs to be I think if we do it in the block JSON, it needs to be in strings. So that's interesting. At this point, let me just do this here quickly. I'm going to see if this works. Should work. Based on my knowledge, this should work. But the reason they've got it here without quotes is because they're passing the attributes in the register block type function. But now what we did last week was we just passed in edit and saved and we used block props. Now my understanding is that if we set up the attributes here, we should get them in the props here. So I'm going to confirm that by logging this to the console. And I'll leave that one there on the edit. And then I must make a note about the different examples. So you can, this is interesting. I generally don't do it this way, but you can also set up your block properties or your block attributes in the sort of first object. I'm trying to, let me just grab this whole thing so we can have a look at it. Actually, let's go to plain version. So this is a pity. There used to be there is a new way of implementing code blocks in the WordPress documentation that actually uses like a copy functionality. So you can just click copy on the window. I think the first few pages had this. Yeah, see, it's using the new block there. So you can just hit copy. But this one isn't. So I might need to make some notes to myself here about getting these updated, and hopefully I can get them updated before the workshop again, like we did last week. So let's make a note of that. PR notes. Create pull request to update. Block to use new code block. Now this is going to bug me. So the problem with being a dev is now I want to know what code option pages that works are using versus this one. So this one is using code tabs and this one is using markdown. Okay, that's why. So we'll need to update this to use the code tabs. That's fine. No, that's for the tabs. So it's not that. This one is using JSX though. So that might be why. Maybe yes, no. No. I wonder if it's this notation here. But that's just the switch. I don't know why. It's going to bother me now until I figure out why. But anyway, I'll come back to that. Mental note. Okay, let's get back to where we were. I get sidetracked way too easily. Okay, so let's just make sure that we're getting this attributes object in block props. And then we'll worry about the RichText component. So let's go back here. Let's close this down. I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to refresh this. Open up DevTools. I want to see the console. That's all fine. And I want to add a block. Yeah, it's not doing what I want it to. Just make sure. Oh, yeah. It might be a caching. So let's refresh the cache. There. So we are there. Okay, that's good. So let's go back here. Let's do that. There we go. Okay, so the block props are there. But I don't see attributes. I see a style object. Don't see any attributes. Pretty sure you could specify attributes in the block JSON. It's possible I've done something wrong, so let's have a look. I think it's in the block API reference. What I want to do is I want to have a look at create block. Have a look at this one. So because this one is using, this is the create block tutorial, and this is using the WordPress create block package. This will be all JSX code, which is what we would use for the React version of this. So here, see, this is being added to the block.json file. Attributes message blah. Now I wonder if this means that we can't do this the other way. We should be able to. Might be because... Okay, well, let's go on with this and see. Let's add the RichText element, or the RichText component. So the RichText component is basically the component you see when you add a paragraph. So if you, let's remove this block. So this is using the RichText component. It allows you to change the text, it allows you to highlight text, it allows you to bold text, italicize text, add links. This paragraph block is effectively the RichText component. Hey, let me do a quick. I haven't got used to the emojis around here, so I'm just going to do this. Okay. So what we're going to do is implement the RichText component. So let's grab a copy of that and stick this in the issue list, notes list. And so we need to add the block editor to the dependency array, which ironically we did in the last step. So here they actually get you to add it, which we've already got over here. If we have a look at our asset file, block editor is already there, which is great. So that's fine. And then you pass it in the same way. So the block editor is already passed in our code from last week. Let's check that. Yep, block editor is there. And then you can set up RichText up here. Okay, so you'll notice here they're doing the use block props at the top. So this might not actually be a bad idea to do this right at the top. So let's move that up to there. Okay, and that gives us use block props. And then we'll pass use block props. Okay, so here it's just passing in props. That might be why I didn't get it. Okay, so let's just go back a step. That might be why I didn't get it. I need to get it from the props of the block. So let me log these two. Just see what's what here. Props. Push that. Okay, let's add the block. Okay, so there is the first one, which is the props, and the second one, which is the block props. So now we need to dive into the differences. So you'll see the attributes are set. So there's the attributes object. It currently doesn't have anything set. It'll probably have the fields, but it won't have any values. But that's fine, at least the attributes are there. It has this context, and then it has the set attributes function, which is what we need. Okay, so that's being passed to props. And then block props is getting things like the class name and the IDs and those kind of things. See there, the name comes through. That's the name. Okay, so the way this works is, let's just see if they talk about props anywhere. No, they don't. Yeah, see, they don't even talk about it. Okay, but basically, if we have a look at this code, what we can infer is that, I'm going to update this slightly so it makes it a little bit more easy for us to read. And I'm going to go props. I'm basically creating an object with just one attribute of props and then the value of the props object, which gets passed to the edit and save functions automatically. This is actually something that confused me when I was working with all of this in the beginning, so that's why it's good to go through this. And then block props is there, and block props. Okay, so that's just the string value and then the actual object. Okay, and then let's go back. In fact, we can move this up here as well at the same time. Let's do it like this. Like they've got it. So I've got use block props up there. So that's fine. And then in the code, they just call just the use block props function because this is registered in the global scope of this function. So we can change this just to that. Okay. So I'll explain what's happening here in a second, but let's just refresh this. And then let's add this. Okay. So there's the props and there's block props. Okay. So the props is specifically the properties set up in the block.json file, or if you've passed it as an object to the edit and save functions. So if you have a look at the block.json file, we've got the title, we've got the name, and you'll see, for example, there's the name, WP JavaScript / basic block. And it passes in the attributes. It also passes in a whole bunch. So this is specific to the properties of this block. Then block props is that special, like they call it a React hook or something. So if we go back to this page over here, where do they talk about it? Yeah, the use block props hook. Maybe we should find the documentation. The use block props React hook is used to set and apply properties on the block's wrapper element. So maybe we should find some documentation on this so that we can understand the difference. Block sports, block attributes, blocks, RichText. You probably find there's going to be something in here that I can find. wonder if this, isn't there a, it'll be block editor package reference. Let's find the block editor. And let's find use block props. Okay. So use block props, this hook is used to lightly mark an element as a block element. The element should be the outermost element of a block. Call this hook and pass the return props to an element to mark as a block. If you define a ref, yeah, refs are a whole React thing that I'm not going to worry about. Okay, so block props has a props object. I want to see if options returns an object. Okay, so the thing to understand about it is that use block props is a special React hook. Let's see if we can find something on React hooks. There's simple JavaScript functions that we can use to isolate the reusable part from a functional component. It's a whole bunch of words. They let you use state and other React features without writing a class. The new function is use state. Okay, so basically it's a special type of what did it say there? It's a simple JavaScript function. Let's have a look at React for beginners here. Probably worth reading through some of this. But basically this is a special function that enables, and this basically is specific to the outermost element of a block. So if we have a look at the code, one of the things that block props does for us is it passes in the class name. So if we have a look at this, where is it now? So it does things like tab index and all those things. So the block props hook is what's enabling things like the ID, the role, all of this stuff. If we have a look at the console again, there's the ARIA label, there's the class name. So this is specific to the wrapper element. And it passes in, if you want, you can pass styling into the block property, into the block props, and it'll apply it. We might use that today, we might not, we'll see. But it sets up ARIA labels, it sets up class names, it sets up data titles and various other things, ID values. So that's specific to the wrapper element of that block. The props object that gets passed to the edit and save functions is specific to the properties of the block itself. So this doesn't get used to affect the wrapper element, it's used internally in edit and save functions. And so it passes in the attributes to the edit and save function, and it passes in the set attributes function, which allows you to update the attributes. So that's the difference between block props, or use block props in this case, and just props. Props is the data, the state, if you will, for the block, which is why we had to pass it in there. So it's something that happens by default. You'll notice that we're not calling any function to pass props into edit or into save. But it's just available to edit and save. And one of the things it passes in is the attributes. It also passes in the name and a few other things. But that's how we get the attributes in our block code. Okay, so I'm going to have to make note about the difference between block props and props. Use block props is actually the hook. Yeah, it's use block props. So this should actually be use block props. Is that what they did in the code? I think that's what they did in the code. See here they just did block props. Hang on, let's go here. Yeah, there it's just use block props, block class name, block props. Let's just go here and have a look. Yeah, it's just block props. So use block props is the hook, and then use block props must have a use block props function. Let's check that. Don't see it here. It's probably not listed somewhere. Maybe I'm understanding this incorrectly. That's definitely a function. I suppose that's also a function. I think what that does is that actually triggers the use block props hook. And then does whatever it does. So use block props is a function. Let's actually see if we can find that in the core code. Like make life easier on ourselves. To understand exactly what this is doing. There it is. Yeah. So this is the function in the core code. This hook. So what's basically happening is, here we're saying this variable is that hook, which is the function, and then we're actually physically calling it by doing this. Which is why previously we could also do that, same thing. Okay, that's something that's interesting and sort of different with JavaScript. You don't generally assign a function to a variable in PHP and then, well, you could. In PHP, you can do this thing. I'm going off topic again, but in PHP, let's actually see if I'm right about this. It's PHP minus A. Yeah. So this is basically PHP on the command line. So I can go echo hello. And I think in PHP, if I go function sum function, and then the function is going to be, let's say it returns hello from the function. There. So that's creating the function. Okay. And then I think you can go and create a variable and say it's equal to some function. I don't know if this is going to work. No, you can't. Can you do that? You can do that. And then if I just call this variable, I think it's going to just echo hello. No, it doesn't. No. Okay. Now I'm going down a tangent. Now I want to see if this is true or not. PHP assign function to variable. Variable functions. That is possible. There. Oh, so you pass it in as a string. Let's try that. So sum func equals. This might actually be handy to show in PHP. So that's that. And then if I go sum func, oh, it's returning. Okay, I want to do this again, return some function. So let's say echo. Okay, let's do this again. So that's that. And then sum func. So the variable is the same as the function name. And then we should be able to do that, and it works. Okay, so it's essentially that. I'm going to have to copy this out. Let's stick it in my notes. Assigning a function or a hook, because a hook is a special function, to a variable. Singing. I can't spell today. As you're wondering why I'm looking like this, I don't touch type very well. So I have to look around my mic to see what's on my keyboard. Okay, cool. Okay, so now we understand what that's doing. So we are basically saying this variable is the use block props hook. A hook is basically just a special function. That function is in this file. This is what it does. It does a whole bunch of things. It's specific to the wrapper element. It basically marks it as a wrapper, as a block. And then we're calling it over here to use it, to pass it into the, I can't remember now what the property, the parameter was there, but passing into that parameter so that all that stuff works. And then props doesn't have to be specified because props is automatically passed through when we register a block type. And because we've specified the same name as the file in the block, lost it now, in the block.json. So this is important. So this is where this whole register block type story comes in. So when we say register block type and we say this directory, register block type goes and looks for a block.json file, reads it, determines the editor script, editor style, the style file values, the attributes, all of that, and sets all of that stuff up so that when this code is run, it passes the properties through to that props parameter. That's a lot to remember. Okay, so now we can do this, and we can do that because that's calling that one because that's in the global scope. Global scope just means it's inside the scope of this whole function. So anything you define here will be available to any inner functions. That's the way JavaScript works. So that passes that in. That passes in the properties, so that's cool. So let's go back to our code. And then there's some example data you can set up. So this is cool because you can set up like a default value. I think you can actually set default on here as well. So let's do that rather. I prefer that way of doing it. So in the block.json, I think you can actually specify here defaults, I think. Hello, JavaScript world. I think that's right. Let me check in the documentation. Now I'm not going to find it, am I? Block attributes, here we go. There's a list somewhere which tells you all the options. Attribute. Sure, there's a default text. HTML. Query. We're not going to use those today. Meta. Yeah, default. There you go. Type string, default blah. So yeah, so you can have a default value. That's what I thought. Okay, so default is hello JavaScript world. Okay. Now, if we go back, let's close this down. Let's close that down. Now we can actually pass. Now the way that it's saved, if we remember from when we echoed this earlier, or at least console log, that it's props, attributes, and then some data. So let's refresh this so we can see what's being passed through. I'm trying to do this all from memory without looking at the code. Ooh, we're getting some errors. Invalid prop for save. Okay. Oh, because we changed all of this. So it's that there. And we should pass in the props to the save function as well. So let's refresh this. So another good note, if you're developing blocks, always have your DevTools open and see any errors. So before you start developing, check what errors you currently have, because currently there seems to be some kind of error on this companion bubble extension, Chrome extension, which I think it's probably my Grammarly. I'm not sure. So it's good to know what errors you expect. This is a fav icon. I don't have a fav icon set up, so that's why that's an error. But any new errors will be related to my block code. So I'm actually make a note of that. Note on developing with developer tools. Okay. So now if we update, if we add this, still getting errors. Okay. Invalid value for prop save on p tag. Okay. I wonder if that's because select a p source HTML type string. Oh, that's because we haven't set up the RichText yet. I think if we just take away the source, I think it works. Let's test that. Nope, still an error. I want to get this working without implementing RichText. I think it's because we have to pass in the content, possibly. Okay, so let's do this. That's my phone ringing. Some insurance company. I think this will work. So let's do this. Yeah, it doesn't have that child value story. So we can take that out and replace that with that. I don't want to do the change. And then props attributes content. Is it content? Yes, content. So you need to get the content attribute. So up here we need to set up the content, which gets from the props, gets the attributes and gets the content value. And then we assign that with the block props. So basically this is like object assign, as I'm pretty sure is assigning this updated information to the block props, I think. We'll check in a second. Thanks, Megan. So let's move that there, and let's update that. I think that will work. Let us see. Still getting an error. Might be a different error. React does not recognize the tag name prop on a DOM element. If you intentionally want it to appear in the DOM as a custom attribute, spell it as lowercase tag name. Where's it getting tag name from? wonder if that's because of the rich text. So let's just try this. Okay, so that did something at least. It hasn't thrown an error, but it hasn't passed in anything to the block. And that's probably because it's not the... So let's just check what that default story was. Block attribute containing default value will be used if the type and source do not match anything. The value is provided by the default field, and the value should match the expected format of the attribute. Now, I wonder if we console log props here. Doesn't look like the default value is being passed through. I know I've done this somewhere. For the life of me, I can't remember where. See, this works because it's calling the on change. Is this thing editable? No, because it's not rich text. I would love to have it so that it just displays. I wonder if the example needs to be set. Let's try setting example. See what happens. I thought default worked. So it's after the attributes. I mean, I could be wrong. I could be remembering it correctly. In case you're wondering why I'm burping, I just had lunch about an hour ago. Okay, so let's put that in there. Let's take out the defaults. Let's see if this works. Ooh. Error. Oh, because of that. Okay. It's the one handy thing about using a IDE that picks up errors, is you can see them straight away. Okay. Let's go to posts, let's go to the world, and let's add the post. Still doesn't pass through. I know I've done this before. It's annoying me now. I'm going to have to go and dig into my own work. So I did a video about this. And it's one of these tutorials. Yeah, I didn't put the code in there. I need to update some of these things. I'm going to just stop that and turn the volume right down and kind of jump through the code here. Let's make this full screen. Okay, so heading, type string. Oh, there, the default is inside there. It's doing the wrong place. So the default is inside of the attribute. Okay, let's go back. Go out of this. So where did we have the defaults? Oh, we had the default in the wrong place. Okay, I knew there was a default somewhere. So it's inside the attributes. There we set the defaults. Okay. So glad I figured this out today. So let's try that again. And let's remove. And let's refresh. And then let's add the block. Attributes content. So it's there. It is there. Okay. Okay, good. So that is working. So now I think I can go and I can do this. I don't think I needed all of this. Because what I can do is I can go. This took me way too long to remember. I can go props, attributes content. Props.attributes content. There it is. Okay, so that's how you access object items. In JavaScript, you use the full stop or the period. So it's props attributes content. The other way you can do it is you can use JavaScript object or array destructuring. So you use the curly braces and you can just call attributes like that. I don't want set attributes yet. And then over here, you can just do attributes content as one example. And you'll see a lot of this in the examples. So that's cool. So then let's pop this over here. And pass in the same attributes content into there. Just want to get this working without the RichText, just setting up and using the attributes. So let's remove. And let's refresh. You kind of do get used to clearing your cache all the time when you're doing this. Because it's JavaScript. Okay, there we go. Hello JavaScript world. Okay, so something else broke, which is fine. Invalid value for prop on save on p tag. Either remove it from the element or pass a string or number value to keep it in the DOM. I think it's because I got the selector specified. Let's just leave it without the selector. Let's add it. No, still getting errors. Value for prop save on p tag. Am I doing this properly? It's another way you can do the destructuring. There's multiple ways to do it. It's the JSX way. Like I'm doing something wrong again. Invalid value for prop save on p tag. We're going to have a look at my code here again. It's heading. All the text controls and stuff. Yeah, so it's prop save. It's just attribute heading. You know what it might be? It might be because it's not being updated. That could be very well it. So even if we're not using the rich text element, we might still need to do the set attributes business. I think how this would work. I think if we just that out, paste that in. And specify the onChange function. And change content, new content, props. Okay, so we're going to have to destructure set attributes here. So there's multiple ways we can do this, but this is the way I'm going to do it for now. I'll do that. And that will update content to whatever the value is. And then that should work, I think. Let's see. It worked. Okay, so the reason that worked is because when the edit function renders, the content is actually doesn't have a value. It's actually just putting the content from the default. So the actual content, if we have a look at, okay, so we're going to have to do it step by step. So we're going to have to, let's go back a step here. So first I'm going to have to, I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to work this step by step. I'm just going to put this into a Scratch file. So first we're going to have to just get this working and then pass in the props, but not use it here. Just call it, pass in a regular string because we're not saving anything, but this will at least get things to work. And show that the attributes works. With the defaults. Cool. Okay, so let me make a note of this. I'm going to have to run through this again tomorrow. Because I'm kind of remembering / figuring out as I go. No, that's not what I want to do. Yeah. So this code should work, and what it's going to do is it's going to echo, it's going to output the hello JavaScript world in the editor, but then it's only going to save hello JavaScript world on the front end. So let's actually just type it in. We'll do it like that. Okay, that's cool. So that's step one. Okay, so step one is just to implement the attribute content in the edit function. Okay, let's make sure that works. What am I doing? Why am I doing it from there? Okay, there it is. And if we preview this, there it is. Okay, perfect. So that works. So that's step one. Right. I wonder if I've got Git enabled for this thing. Sites, LearnPress, content. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to make extensive notes for myself here then. So let's do this. Instead of doing it that way, let's do it this way. It's going to save this. We're going to do step one. Sign and pass in the attributes to the edit function. Okay, so that's step one. Cool. So there's the block to JSON, there's the function, it works. Right. Step two, apply the onChange event and pass the updated attribute to the save function. Yeah, that's cool. So let's go that route. So then that will be setting up set attributes. So basically in the props that gets passed, there's also a set attributes function. You can destruct it like that. And then you can create another function to change the content. which calls the setAttributes function and passes in a new object. And what that will do is it'll update the content attributes of your block with whatever the new content is in the editor. So in this case, now the minute the edit function is fired, it'll render the element, it'll pass in the content from the default value, which is hello JavaScript world. The unchanged content won't fire yet because we haven't implemented using useBlock props. So that's where this comes in. So what we do there is we replace useBlock props with this. And we don't have to worry about the tag name, but we do have to worry about the content. So what that does is it assigns, let me just check object assign. I'm pretty sure what it does is it just adds more. Copies all properties from one or more sources to a target. Yes. Okay, so let's make a note of that. So basically, it's taking whatever's in the new object and adding it to the first object, and then it's updated. So here it's A1, B2, source is B4, C5, object assigned target source, target becomes A1, B4, C5, because B is overridden by B4. Okay, so it's basically like array merge in PHP. So what that does is that's going to pass the onChange function to the onChange function in block props, in useBlock props. So that's again something set up in useBlock props, and it's going to pass in the content of this block element, which in this case happens to be that value there. So pass that value into the onChange thing, that'll update the content with the new content, and then we can pass that to the save. Now this is all kind of redundant because it's all the same content, but at least then it enables us to do the following and do this, and then that. No, not constructor content. Okay, so all that's doing is allowing us to update the content of the save function. We're not able to actually change it yet because we still need to implement the RichText, but at least the flow is correct. So let's test that, which I think we just did. We'll do it again. We might not have time to do the color pickers today, but that's okay. Okay, now it's got an error. Content is not defined. Oh, it's got to be attributes content. Yes, got to pass in the updated content. Okay, that's right. So let's remove that and refresh. Add it. Okay, no errors, it's rendering correctly. If we... you can't see the code that way, so let's have a look at the code this way. Okay, if we look at the code editor, there's the hello JavaScript world. It's stored as a string on the p tag, so that's perfect. So we can close out of this here. And if we preview this, there it works. If we now change the default value and refresh all of this, then we should see that new value, hello my JavaScript world, and if we preview it on the front end, this will do the same thing. Yes, cool. So all it's doing is saving the default value to the, when it renders, it saves that value as the content, updates it into the save, and then just saves it. And you'll notice that in terms of actual content, all it's really doing is making sure that it puts it into the paragraph tag. So the save, the onContent function actually reads it from the paragraph tag and then saves it. Which is all well and good, but now we want to use the RichText editor. So Now we can set up the type source HTML select P, all of that kind of stuff. So the fact that we're setting up the sources HTML means we can do bold tags and italics and all that stuff. The default should still work, but then by passing in the tag name stuff and the rich text and all of that, and then changing this from the P tag to the rich text, that's going to just work magically. So let's do that. So let's set up the rich text element. The rich text goes in there. And then we need to pass rich text into there. No. Rich text goes there. Update this so the tag name is P and value is the content. See, content is getting the content there, so we're doing the same thing. So the tag name, we just add the tag name to it. And then down here, you'll see on the save, you actually do the rich text content because that saves the content to the database. So down here, let's go back one step. So here it's rich text content. And then we object assign this to the props. And it's going to be this. So we see this, it's two ways you can do it. So if you just pass in props like that, you can use it that way. Or if you'd use the destructuring, which I prefer, then you can just do it that way. It's just less code. And then we can take out these child elements because that's all just going to magically work. And we can take out this because that's all just going to magically work. And we can do some code formatting here. There we go. Okay, so let's run through this. So there's rich text, there's the unchanged content function, which is perfect. This basically assigns it, and it assigns it to the rich text, so that should work. That's creating the element, rich text, all of that, that should work. Okay. So let's go back here. And let's refresh all of this. And let's add it. Okay, so that works. And if we preview this, it also should work. So it's passed in my JavaScript world from the default. But what's cool now is now we can edit this and just say hello JavaScript world. And it'll, once we edit it, it will trigger the save function. It actually triggers the save call. So if we preview this now, hello JavaScript world. And what's cool about this is you can actually see this happening in real time. So if you put a console log in your edit function, for example, and you say console log acknowledging the folks in the chat, and if we say edit, and you can see every time the edit is called and every time the save is called. And inside there, we can go console log save. And then we can remove, I just like to always remove these out. I'm weird that way. And reload there. And if we add it, there's the edit function being called. And now watch, every time I change this, calls edit, keeps calling edit. And when edit gets called, see, and their save gets called afterwards. So basically what's happening is every time edit's getting called, the onChange event triggers. It updates the props attributes content with the new content from the rich text. So that's what's happening over here. And then when save is called, it passes that value to the save property over here and saves that to the database, basically. And that's why when you refresh, when you preview, it shows you hello my JavaScript, which is what it was. Cool. So that's the last step for today. So I'm going to Save that code. And go back here. Okay, so there's a lot to dive into here today. I don't think I'm going to get to the color picking, which I wanted to. I think that's a good thing. I think there's a lot to get into here. So I'm going to stop there for today. If it only takes an hour in the workshop, that's fine. But I've got a feeling I'm going to have to go into some of these things and explain what's going on. I'm going to have to explain why the code samples look different. I'm going to have to show what props contains and how you can destructure things and pass things around. So I'm going to have to work through that. I'm going to have to show why this is HTML, but it isn't currently. I could have actually, now I can make it HTML because now it's a rich text element, but it still works if you noticed. So that's that. I'm going to have to talk about defining the attributes and where you can define them and how you can define them. So there's a lot to cover. Even though it's a simple piece of code, it's a lot to cover in one section. So I'm going to leave it like that. I'll make something. Yeah, I'll leave it like that for now. That's going to be the code at the end of today. I think that's a good chunk of code to dive through in the next workshop. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to leave that destructured like that because I like the destructured option. I'm going to leave that the way it is. I'm going to leave that the way it is. So let's just update the code. So let's grab that. Let's edit this. And then get the new one here. This. Cool, that's there, that's done. Update. Okay, so those are the two things we're going to cover. I think that's good. The next thing I would like to do is make the styling editable. So that would be another attribute. So one for the background color, one for the text color, and then maybe even be cool to have a slider for the padding. So those would be cool things to add, but I think I'm going to keep that for a separate workshop because that's also a lot to cover. Setting up the sidebar settings, setting up toolbar settings if we need them. The cool thing about this is I can do things like links because it's rich text. So I can grab this and I can pop that in there. That's very cool. I like that. And I can make this bold and I can do whatever I want here. But yeah, the next logical thing would be to do the colors nicely. Autocorrect check crashed. I don't know why that was Grammarly being weird. Yeah, I like that. That's a cool little block that just does some things, and we'll mess around with those. Okay, I think I'm going to call that today. I think that's a good place to stop. I'm probably going to end up working through all of this again tomorrow while I prepare my slides. But I think that's a good place to stop for now because it covers quite a bit. Look at that. It's like maybe 10 extra lines of code, but it covers quite a lot. All right, that's my bit for today. Thanks everybody for watching. If you were watching, if you found it interesting, I am done.